My name is Claire Morrison, and I'm 32 years old. People assume dentists have calm lives, clean offices, gentle routines, soft music, and minty air. What they don't see is the way your shoulders burn after 8 hours bent over strangers' mouths, or how your eyes ache from staring at tiny fractures and inflamed gums, or how exhaustion settles into your bones so deeply that sleep stops feeling restorative. For the past 2 months, I hadn't just been a dentist. I'd been everything. I worked at a large private practice in Denver, one of the better ones in the city. I had been there nearly 10 years, long enough that when my boss, Dr. Harrison, had a personal crisis and needed time off, he trusted me to keep the place running. That meant patients all day, then paperwork long after the last one left, supplier calls, payroll questions, staff schedules, insurance disputes, the unglamorous backbone of a practice most people never think about. By the end of each night, my back screamed, my wrists throbbed. I'd drive home gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me upright. So when Dr. Harrison told me he'd be back the following Monday, giving me my first real weekend off in 2 months, I didn't hesitate. I needed air, silence, bass. Sis. I needed my lake house. It's a small cabin about 40 minutes outside Lakewood, near Bear Creek Lake. Nothing fancy, wood siding, a narrow porch, and windows that look straight out at pine trees and water. I bought it 3 years ago, with my own savings. No help, no loans from family, just discipline and time. That house was mine in the deepest sense of the word. I usually went there a few times a month, whenever life in the city pressed too close. No phone calls, no emergencies, just the sound of wind in the trees and water moving without urgency. I wasn't the only one with keys, though. I'd given my parents a set after they retired. They liked quiet weekends there. I'd also given access to my younger brother Ryan after he got married 2 years ago. His wife's name is Melissa. From the moment I met her, something felt off. She was 28, always perfectly dressed, always evaluating. She spoke to people the way someone might inspect furniture, politely, but with judgment. She had opinions about everything, about my job, about how often I worked, about the fact that I wasn't married yet. She once laughed and said, "You really should try harder. Men don't like women who live at the office." I'd smiled and said nothing. Ryan loved her. That was enough, or at least I told myself it was. That Friday evening, I left work later than planned, stopped by King Soopers, and picked up enough groceries for a quiet, indulgent weekend. Pasta, sauce, chicken, bread, cheese, a bottle of Pinot Grigio, dark chocolate, shampoo and body wash, things I always forgot. By the time I loaded everything into my Honda CR-V, the sun was already starting to sink behind the Rockies. I rolled down the windows as I drove, letting the cool air wash over me, imagining myself on the porch later, wine glass in hand, doing absolutely nothing. I felt lighter with every mile, until I turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin. The lights were on. Not just one or two, all of them. Bright. Every window glowing like the place was hosting an event. And there were cars, 3 of them, parked crookedly near the side. One of them was unmistakable, Ryan's silver Camry. I slowed to a stop and just sat there. He hadn't told me he'd be there. No text, no call, nothing. I told myself maybe they were just stopping by. Maybe they'd leave soon. Then I heard the music. Loud. Thumping. The kind of bass that carries through walls. Confused but already tense, I got out of the car and walked up to the front door. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. The music drowned everything out. I pulled out my keys and unlocked the door. The smell hit me first. Alcohol and perfume, heavy and sour in the air. Then the noise. Laughter. Voices. Glass clinking. There were at least 10 people in my living room. People I didn't know. Empty beer bottles and wine glasses littered my coffee table. Someone had opened windows I'd carefully sealed before winter. There was a Bluetooth speaker blasting music I didn't own. Melissa stood near the kitchen, drink in hand, cheeks flushed. When someone noticed me, the music cut abruptly. Every head turned. I waited for embarrassment, apologies, something normal. Instead, what I saw was irritation. Melissa narrowed her eyes and said, "What are you doing here?" For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. This is my house," I said slowly. "What are you doing here?" She laughed, a sharp, careless sound. "We have a key. That means we can come whenever we want." Her parents sat on my couch, silent. Other relatives stared like spectators. I came here to relax, I said, forcing calm into my voice. So you'll need to wrap this up and leave tonight. The room erupted. Complaints, protests, disbelief. Melissa turned to the group and said loudly, "Why is this stupid Leech even here?" Then she looked directly at me. "Get out," she said, "before we kick you out ourselves." Something cold slid down my spine. I looked at her parents, at the strangers, at my brother, who wouldn't meet my eyes. No one spoke. No one defended me. I smiled. I don't know why. Maybe because if I didn't, I would have screamed. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll leave." I turned around and walked out. As I closed the door behind me, I heard laughter. Insults. Words I won't repeat. I drove away, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. And as the cabin disappeared in my rearview mirror, one thought repeated over and over in my mind. They just made a mistake they don't understand yet. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than 40 minutes. Not because of traffic, not because of weather, but because every mile gave my anger more room to breathe. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I kept waiting for it. The tears, the shaking hands, the familiar collapse that usually followed moments of humiliation. But none of that came. Instead, there was a tight, focused pressure behind my eyes, like something inside me was sharpening. When I got home, I carried the groceries inside one bag at a time. I put everything away carefully. Pasta in the cabinet, wine in the fridge, chicken in the freezer. I moved slowly, deliberately, like if I rushed, something might break open. Then I sat down at my kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your thoughts echo louder than they should. I made myself a mug of chamomile tea and wrapped both hands around it, letting the warmth sink into my palms. Outside, the city hummed faintly. Cars passed. Life continued. Meanwhile, my own living room, my cabin, was being trashed by people who had just told me I didn't belong there. A leech. The word replayed in my head. I took a slow sip of tea and stared at the wall. And that's when I started adding things up. It began innocently, almost automatically, the way my brain always does when something doesn't feel right. I didn't plan to make a list. I just remembered. When Ryan got engaged to Melissa 2 years ago, they wanted a wedding that looked like something out of a magazine. Elegant venue, live band, designer flowers, a photographer whose name alone cost more than my monthly rent. Ryan came to me with our parents. "Just some help," he'd said. "I'm a little short." My parents were retired, living on a fixed income. Ryan had always struggled with money. And Melissa didn't work. She'd said more than once that she wasn't made for working, that she was meant to enjoy life and be taken care of. I wrote the check, $22,000. I remembered standing in the bank, pen hovering for just a second before I signed. I remembered telling myself it was a gift. That family helps family. At the wedding, Melissa hugged me briefly and said, "Thanks," before turning away to greet someone more important. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. Then there was the apartment. About a year ago, Ryan's company cut commissions. Suddenly, his income wasn't enough to cover their lifestyle. He called me one night, voice tight with embarrassment. "Just for a few months," he said, "until things stabilize." Their rent was $1,600 a month. I agreed. 2 months passed, then 3, then 6, a year. 12 months of me transferring money directly to their landlord every single month, over $19,000 in rent alone. And Melissa never once asked how I was doing, never asked if it was a burden. She just kept posting photos online, new clothes, fancy dinners, weekend trips. I swallowed and took another sip of tea. Then I thought about the savings account. I'd set it up years ago, an emergency fund, something that made me feel safe in a world where everything could change overnight. There had been about $30,000 in it. I gave Ryan access after he got married. "Only for real emergencies," I told him. He promised. But when I checked the account, casually, not even suspiciously, I'd see withdrawals. $400, $500, sometimes more. I never asked. I just replaced the money, because that's what I'd always done. Then there was the car, Melissa's car. For their wedding gift, I didn't hand them keys, but I might as well have. I paid the monthly loan, $375 a month, for 2 straight years. $9,000. I set the mug down slowly. Wedding, rent, car, emergency account. I did the math again, just to be sure. Over $60,000. Probably more. And she had stood in my living room, my house, and called me a leech. Something inside me shifted. Not exploded, not snapped. Shifted. Like a door closing. I stood up and walked into my bedroom, pulled my phone from the charger, and opened my banking app. My heart was steady. That scared me more than if it had been racing. I went to the automatic payments first. There it was, the monthly transfer for Ryan's rent. I stared at it for a few seconds, memories flashing through my mind. Him thanking me, promising it was temporary, telling me I was a lifesaver. I canceled it. The app asked if I was sure. I was. Next, I found the car loan payment. Canceled. I didn't hesitate. Then I sat back down at the table, phone still in my hand, and stared at the blank screen. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next morning, I woke up early and drove to the bank. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. I spoke with a manager I'd worked with before, a woman named Gloria. "I need to remove someone from my account," I said calmly. She nodded. "Name?" "My brother, Ryan Morrison." She typed for a moment, then looked up. "That's done." Just like that. When I walked back out into the parking lot, sunlight warmed my face. I took a deep breath. I didn't call Ryan. I didn't call Melissa. I didn't call my parents. I waited. Exactly 1 week later, my phone rang. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "What happened?" he demanded, skipping hello. "The landlord says the rent didn't come through." "Because I didn't send it," I said. There was silence. "I also removed your access to my savings account," I added, "and I stopped paying for Melissa's car." The silence broke into shouting. "Are you out of your mind?" he yelled. "What is wrong with you?" "Nothing," I said evenly. "I'm perfectly sane. You should ask your wife what's wrong with her." He hung up. 30 seconds later, my phone lit up again. "Melissa." I didn't answer. She called again. Then the text started. "You're selfish, greedy. How can you do this to family? You think you're better than us." I read every message. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The messages didn't stop after that first night. They multiplied. Melissa sent them in waves, long paragraphs followed by short, venomous bursts. Ryan alternated between rage and panic, his texts swinging wildly from, "How could you do this to us?" to, "Please, Claire, we're in trouble." I didn't respond to any of it. I went to work on Monday like nothing had changed. I treated patients. I explained procedures. I smiled through small talk. But underneath all of it, there was a strange, unfamiliar calm, like I'd finally stopped bracing for a blow that had been coming for years. On Wednesday evening, my mother called. I stared at her name on my phone for a long moment before answering. "Claire," she said immediately, voice tight. "What's going on? Ryan called me in a panic." I leaned against my kitchen counter and closed my eyes. I stopped paying for their rent and the car, and I removed Ryan from my savings account. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "You can't just do that." "I can," I said, and I did. "Melissa didn't mean what she said," my mother rushed on. "She was drinking. You know how she gets sometimes. She's moody, that's all." Moody. That word landed like a slap. "She told me to get out of my own house," I said quietly. "She called me a leech, in front of her entire family." Ryan stood there and said nothing. "Well," my mother said carefully, "Ryan loves his wife. You have to understand his position." I laughed once, short and humorless. "I understand it perfectly. He chose her comfort over my dignity." "Claire, honey," she pleaded, "this is going to cause a family conflict. Can't you give in a little, just until things settle down?" Something hardened in my chest. "This is about respect," I said. "If Melissa can't respect me but still expects me to fund her life, then the money stops. It's that simple." My mother sighed, long and tired. "You're being difficult." "No," I said, "I'm being done." I hung up before she could say anything else. The next thing I did was call a locksmith. We set an appointment for Friday morning at the lake house. I didn't tell anyone. When Friday came, I drove out early, the road quiet and empty in the pale morning light. The cabin looked the same from the outside, but walking up to it felt different now, like reclaiming something that had been stolen in plain sight. The locksmith, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a coffee-stained thermos, replaced every lock: front door, back door, deadbolts. He handed me a new set of keys when he was done. "No one else has copies," he said. "Perfect," I replied. I stood on the porch for a long moment after he left, listening to the wind move through the trees. The house was quiet again. Mine again. That night, I slept there alone. No music, no shouting, no strangers. Just silence. Exactly 1 week after the rent payment failed, the real fallout began. Ryan showed up at my apartment with my parents. I hadn't been expecting them. The knock was sharp, urgent. When I looked through the peephole and saw all three of them standing there, my stomach tightened, but I opened the door anyway. Melissa wasn't with them. Smart, I thought. They knew seeing her would only make things worse. We sat around my kitchen table, the same place where I'd done the math that changed everything. No one spoke at first. The silence pressed down on us, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Ryan cleared his throat. I talked to Melissa, he said. She's willing to apologize. I raised an eyebrow. That's generous of her. But, he continued quickly, only if you give everything back. The rent, the car payments, my access to your account, all of it. I stared at him. Then I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound burst out of me, sharp and incredulous, and I had to press my hand to my mouth to stop myself. You're serious? I asked. My mother frowned. Claire, this isn't funny. No, I said, wiping my eyes. It's ridiculous. I'm not giving anything back, I said calmly. Not a cent. My father, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Ryan's face flushed. You're tearing this family apart. I picked up my phone and unlocked it. Let me show you something, I said. I opened my messages and scrolled. Then I turned the phone toward them. Read. They leaned in. The kitchen filled with silence again, but this time it was heavier. Melissa's words stared back at them in black and white. Old maid, useless woman, no man wants you, pathetic, jealous, ugly. Dozens of messages, days' worth of venom. My mother's face drained of color. My father looked at the table like it might swallow him whole. Ryan just stared. This, I said softly, is what your wife really thinks of me. And you want me to keep paying for her life? No one answered. My mother finally cleared her throat. Claire, I know this is hurtful, but Ryan is struggling. It's very hard for him to support his wife without your help. I shook my head slowly. I'm not supporting any of you anymore. Ryan stood up abruptly. Fine, if that's how you want it. They left without another word. I sat there long after the door closed, staring at the empty chairs. Doubt crept in around the edges. Small, persistent. Had I gone too far? Had I been too harsh? Then I remembered Melissa's face, red with laughter, as she told me to get out of my own house. And the doubt disappeared. 2 weeks later, my mother called again. Claire, she said quietly, the landlord evicted Ryan and Melissa. They're moving in with us. I see, I replied. I felt a flicker of sympathy for my parents, but only a flicker. They had chosen their side. And now they would live with it. When my parents let Ryan and Melissa move into their house, I knew it wouldn't end quietly. I just didn't expect it to unravel so fast. At first, I heard nothing. A strange, heavy silence settled in after that last phone call, and I let it. I went back to my routines. Work, gym, weekends at the lake house. The cabin felt different now. Safer. Like it had exhaled along with me. I cooked simple meals, read books I'd been meaning to open for years, and slept without waking up tense at 3 a.m. For the first time in a long while, my life wasn't revolving around someone else's needs. Then, about 3 weeks after Ryan and Melissa moved in with my parents, my phone rang again. It was my mother. I answered, already bracing myself. Claire, she said, sounding tired in a way that went beyond age. I didn't want to bother you, but I don't know who else to talk to. I leaned back against my kitchen counter. What's wrong? She hesitated. It's Melissa. I didn't say anything. I let the silence invite her to continue. She's difficult, my mother said carefully. She complains about everything. The food, the house, the way I clean, the temperature. Nothing is ever good enough. I closed my eyes. Last night, my mother went on, she insisted I cook something separate for her because she doesn't do leftovers. Then she criticized how I seasoned it. That sounds familiar, I said. My mother sighed. She's also been rearranging things. She made your father move the couch yesterday. You know his back isn't good. Something tightened in my chest. Did Ryan stop her? No, my mother admitted quietly. He defended her, said she's under a lot of stress. Of course he did. And today, she continued, she told me the kitchen cabinets were disorganized and made me take everything out and reorganize them. Claire, my blood pressure... Mom, I interrupted gently but firmly. You chose this. There was a pause. I know, she said. I didn't realize it would be this bad. I let out a slow breath. What do you want me to do? I don't know, she whispered. I guess I just needed someone to hear me. I hear you, I said, but I'm not stepping in. She didn't argue. We hung up a few minutes later, and I felt something shift again. Not relief, not guilt, but distance. A widening gap that I no longer felt responsible for closing. Over the next few weeks, the calls continued. Not from Ryan, from my mother. Each one painted the same picture in darker shades. Melissa criticized everything my parents did. She refused to help around the house. She slept late, stayed up even later, and treated the place like a hotel she hadn't paid for. She complained about having to live there at all, about how unfair it was, about how her life had been ruined. And Ryan, my sweet younger brother, who used to apologize if he borrowed a pen and forgot to return it, defended her every time. "She's just adjusting," he'd say. "She's sensitive." She didn't mean it like that. One afternoon, my mother called, sounding particularly shaken. "She told your father he was slow," she said. "Right to his face. Said he was useless around the house." My jaw clenched. "And what did Ryan do?" I asked. "He told your father not to take it personally," she replied. I didn't respond. What was there to say? By the end of the second month, my parents sounded exhausted. The house that had once been their peaceful retirement retreat had turned into a pressure cooker, and I felt detached. Not cruel, just resolved. They had all dismissed me when I needed them. Now they were living inside that decision. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One evening, I was at home making spaghetti carbonara, music playing softly in the background, when there was a knock at my door. I froze. No one ever came by unannounced. I muted the music and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. My parents were standing there. And Ryan. "No, Melissa." I opened the door and stepped aside without a word. We sat at the table again. That table seemed to be the stage for every reckoning in my life. Ryan looked thinner, tired. His shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. My mother didn't waste time. "Claire," she said, voice trembling slightly, "we can't do this anymore." I nodded once. I figured. "She's impossible," my mother admitted. "She yells, she insults, she treats us like servants in our own home." My father finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I should have said something sooner. I didn't. That's on me." Ryan stared at his hands. "I tried," he said. "I really did." I met his eyes. "No, you didn't." He flinched. "You tried to keep her happy," I continued calmly. "You didn't try to be fair, or decent, or honest." Silence stretched between us. "She says everything is your fault," Ryan muttered. "That if you hadn't cut us off, none of this would have happened." I almost smiled. "And do you believe that?" I asked. He hesitated. That was answer enough. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We're not asking you for money," she said quickly. "We're just asking for help, advice, something." I gently pulled my hand back. "My advice," I said, "is to stop enabling her, all of you." Ryan looked up sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied evenly, "that if someone treats everyone around them like garbage and never faces consequences, they'll never change." My father nodded slowly. Ryan swallowed. "She won't leave." "Then you'll have to," I said. His face drained of color. We sat there for a long moment, the truth settling heavily in the air. They left shortly after, quieter than when they arrived. A week later, my mother called me with news that didn't surprise me at all. "Ryan filed for divorce," she said. I closed my eyes. Finally, the news should have shocked me. It should have knocked the air out of my lungs, sent me spiraling into grief or guilt, or some complicated mix of both. After all, Ryan was my little brother. His marriage ending wasn't something I'd ever wished for him, no matter how badly things had gone. But when my mother said the words, "Ryan filed for divorce," what I felt wasn't surprise. It was inevitability. "I see," I said quietly into the phone. My mother didn't speak for a moment. When she did, her voice was fragile. "It's ugly, Claire. She's furious." I could imagine it all too well. In the weeks that followed, fragments of the truth reached me through my parents. Melissa didn't accept the divorce quietly. She took it as a personal betrayal, not a consequence. She accused Ryan of ruining her life, of choosing his family over her, of being weak, pathetic, incapable of providing the life she deserved. She posted about it online. At first, the posts were vague. Quotes about betrayal, about women being punished for expecting too much. Then they became specific. Names weren't mentioned, but anyone who knew them understood exactly who she was talking about. Then she stopped being subtle altogether. She called Ryan a failure, a man who couldn't support his wife. She mocked his job, his income, his spine. She implied that she'd sacrificed her youth for him and received nothing in return. My mother told me Ryan stopped sleeping, that he barely ate, that he spent hours staring at his phone, reading and rereading words that stripped him down piece by piece. "She knows exactly where to hurt him," my mother said one night, her voice thick with guilt. And we let her. The divorce moved forward anyway. Melissa demanded things she had never paid for. She insisted she was entitled to money that had never been hers. She threatened to drag things out, to make it as painful as possible. But something in Ryan had finally broken and healed at the same time. He didn't fight her. He didn't beg. He didn't try to appease her. He let the process run its course. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Melissa moved back in with her parents. Ryan stayed with mine for a short while longer, quiet and withdrawn, like someone recovering from a long illness. Then, slowly, things began to change. He got a new job, a good one. My mother called me the day he accepted the offer, her voice lighter than it had been in months. "He's making more than he ever did before," she said. "He sounds confident again." I smiled. "I'm glad." A few weeks later, he moved into his own apartment. Nothing extravagant. Clean. Modest, entirely his. He did it all himself, my mother added, almost in awe. No help. Good, I thought. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my mother called me with a tone in her voice I hadn't heard in a long time, something between disbelief and grim amusement. "You'll never guess who called Ryan," she said. I paused. "Melissa." "Yes." I sat down slowly on the edge of my couch. What did she want? "She said she'd made a mistake," my mother replied. "That she'd been under stress, that she still loved him, that they belonged together." I closed my eyes. "And what did Ryan say?" "He told her no." Relief washed through me, warm and steady. "She didn't take it well," my mother continued. "She's been calling, texting. She even showed up at his apartment one day." My stomach tightened. "Did he call the police?" "He threatened to. She left." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. A week later, my phone rang late in the evening. I didn't recognize the number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" "Claire," a familiar voice said. My spine went rigid. "Melissa." I almost hung up. "What do you want?" I asked instead. "I need your help," she said quickly, her tone urgent, rehearsed. "Please, I know I was horrible to you. I know I said terrible things, but I need you to talk to Ryan for me. He won't listen. Maybe if it comes from you." I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. "You're asking me," I said incredulously, "to help you get back together with my brother." "I've changed," she insisted. "I see things clearly now." "No," I said calmly. "You see that his life improved without you." Her breath hitched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I replied. "You didn't want him when he struggled. You wanted his money, my money, the lifestyle." "You're just bitter," she snapped suddenly. "You've always been jealous, alone. That's why you did all this." There it was, the familiar poison. "Maybe I am alone," I said evenly. "But I'd rather be alone than with someone who treats people the way you do." She was silent. "You called me a leech," I continued. "You humiliated me in my own home. You sent messages tearing me apart. And now you want my help?" Her voice shook. "I made mistakes." "So did I said. "I let you think there would never be consequences." "I deserve another chance," she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "You don't." I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her directly. Over the next few months, I heard about her occasionally. She started dating someone new quickly, a man my mother described with thinly veiled concern. He drank heavily. There were rumors about drugs, about fights, about chaos. "She looks awful," my mother said once. "Unhappy." I felt a twinge of pity, but it passed. Ryan and I didn't speak much at first. There was too much unspoken history between us, too much shame, but time softened the edges. We texted, briefly, then longer. One Sunday I ran into him at my parents' house. He looked different, lighter, steadier. "I need to say something," he told me quietly as we stood in the kitchen. "I'm sorry for all of it. I should have protected you. I didn't." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I forgive you," I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it without reservation. Forgiveness didn't fix everything overnight. It didn't erase the years of quiet resentment, the moments I'd swallowed my discomfort to keep the peace, or the humiliation of being told to leave my own house like I was nothing. But it did something else, something quieter, steadier. It let me move forward without carrying their weight anymore. After that Sunday at my parents' house, Ryan and I started talking more regularly. Nothing dramatic, no emotional confessions every week, just small, ordinary things. A text about a show we both liked. a message asking how my day went, sometimes a shared memory from childhood that made us laugh. He never asked me for money again. Not once. That mattered more than any apology. Work settled into a comfortable rhythm. With Dr. Harrison back full-time, my evenings were mine again. I left the office before dark. I cooked real meals. I signed up for a yoga class and actually went. My body started to feel like it belonged to me again instead of to exhaustion. And my finances, God, my finances. Without the constant outflow of money, my savings grew faster than I expected. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for the next emergency call, the next request framed as temporary but destined to become permanent. I bought the car I'd been putting off for years, a Subaru Outback, deep blue, reliable, mine. I took it up to the lake house on a crisp fall weekend, packed with groceries I didn't have to share, books I wanted to read, and absolutely no sense of obligation. The cabin felt like a different place now. Not just quiet, but respected. I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun dip behind the trees, thinking about how close I'd come to losing this place without ever realizing it. Not because someone took it from me legally, but because I'd been willing to give it away emotionally. That realization stayed with me. My relationship with my parents improved, slowly, cautiously. They apologized, really apologized, months after the divorce was final. My mother admitted she'd minimized things she shouldn't have. My father told me he regretted staying silent when it mattered most. I forgave them. Not because they deserved it immediately, but because I didn't want to keep reliving the same pain. Ryan continued to grow into himself. He thrived at his new job, got promoted within the year, and moved into a nicer apartment. One evening, over dinner at our parents' house, he mentioned he was seeing someone. "Her name's Emily," he said, a little shy. "She's a teacher." I smiled. "She sounds nice." "She is," he said. "She's kind, stable." I understood exactly what he meant. As for Melissa, she faded into the background of my life. I heard updates occasionally, always through my mother. She stayed with the new man for a while, the one who drank too much, the one whose temper everyone tiptoed around. The relationship was loud, messy, and predictable. "She looks unhappy," my mother said once, almost sadly. "Tired." I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it didn't last. Some people don't want peace, they want control, and when they lose it, they mistake the emptiness for injustice. One evening, months later, I got another call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. They didn't leave a voicemail. The number never called again. That was enough. Around that time, I started dating again. Not because I felt lonely, not because I felt like I had to prove anything, but because my life finally had room for someone new. His name was Daniel. We met through mutual friends, ran into each other again by coincidence at a coffee shop, and started talking. He was thoughtful, patient, and, most importantly, curious about me in a way that didn't feel transactional. He listened. He asked questions. He never made jokes about my job or my independence. On our third date, we talked about family. I told him the truth. Not all the details, but enough. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to fix anything. "I'm glad you stood up for yourself," he said simply. That was it. No judgment, no advice, just acknowledgement. A year passed. Then another. My life didn't become perfect, but it became mine. I traveled more. I laughed more. I slept better. I stopped apologizing for having boundaries. One quiet evening at the lake house, sitting alone on the porch, with the familiar sound of water moving gently in the dark, I thought back to that night. The music blasting, strangers in my living room, Melissa's voice cutting through the noise as she called me a leech. For so long that word had haunted me. Now it felt almost absurd. I wasn't a leech. I never had been. I'd been generous. Too generous. I'd confused love with sacrifice and kindness with silence. I'd believed that keeping everyone comfortable was my responsibility. It wasn't. Family matters, love matters, but respect matters more. Sometimes the hardest lesson isn't learning when to give, it's learning when to stop. And sometimes the moment someone tells you to leave your own house is the moment you finally realize you've already been walking out of yourself for years. I locked the door behind that version of me, and I never looked back.